Again, welcome to this week's office hour for ESG and ESG-CV. My name is Marian Goldberg, and I am today's moderator. If you are just joining us, please go ahead to the chat and introduce yourself with your name and the region you represent. As a reminder, this office hour session is being recorded for public record. A copy of the slide deck and the recording will be emailed to all attendees. Next slide, please. All questions must be submitted in the chat box. Please type your question in the chat box. The team will read the questions out loud at the end of the presentation and will provide answers if possible throughout the presentation. All questions and answers entered into the chat box will be recorded as part of the public record. Alongside our presenters, we also have several HCD staff, including ESG representatives, ESG-CV grant administrators, and other consultants who are able to answer questions during the Q&A session. Next slide, please. Today's agenda includes ESG and ESG-CV updates, office hour updates, upcoming trainings, ESG and ESG-CV questions and answers, and our Spotlight Series presentation on Cultural Humility Workshop Series overview. Next slide, please. And now I will turn it over to Connie for our ESG updates. Connie?
Thank you, Marian. Good morning, everybody. 2022 ESG applications, for those that had applications that in the system, we were having encountered some technical issues with our Grants Network portal last week. So on Friday, we sent an e-blast out and a message through eCivis to all the applicants that we extended that due date from August 17th, which was last Wednesday, to today, which is August 24th. And that says 5 p.m., but it's actually they're due today by 3 p.m. So if you have not done so and you struggled last week to get your application submitted because of some technical issues, you need to get that in today by 3 p.m. If you have any questions, please email the ESG NOFA at hcd.ca.inbox and we will respond immediately to you. Or you can always contact me if you have any questions. But again, August 24th, which is today, they are due by 3 p.m. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, this is just a reminder that we still have the slides as far as where you find the webinars, the FAQs for those that have applied for the 2022, and you'll notice if you haven't been to our redesigned webpage, we do have icons out there now. So you'll go to the notice of funding. The apply now is where you would get into the Grants Network portal. Next slide, please. A reminder for all 2020 grantees. Expenditure deadline, of course, passed on July 7th. Please, if you have not done so, get your final request for funds and your certificate of closeout to your ESG representative no later than today. Today is a big day for everything. So if you are struggling to do that, please reach out to your ESG rep, send them an email saying, letting us know when you will be able to get that to us. We are up against a deadline. The contracts expire on 9/7 per your standard agreement. We need time to process your request for funds and get it to accounting and so forth. So get those in by close of business tonight. The 2021 ESG contracts, for those that were awarded under that allocation, they are being routed. And just as a reminder, those that were awarded for 2021, as you get your executed contract, be sure you look at your standard agreement. It looks a little different this year. We did put some milestones in there, which would show on Exhibit E. Exhibit E shows you do have a 20% expenditure milestone due 120 days from the date of execution. And that really has always been there, that you have 120 days to submit your first request for funds to us after your contract has been executed. Next slide, please. A reminder, the STD 209 is a form that we are required to send back to you when we need to send your request for funds, a detailed expense report back. You've requested a payment, and for whatever reason we feel we can't, we have some questions, and so we need to stop it and send it back to you. We do send an STD 209. So be sure that when you submit a request for funds to your ESG representative, that you have a complete detailed expense report. Don't forget, everything is PII. We don't want to see any clients' names on your detailed expense report. Take a look one more time at your numbers. Do the numbers add up from your detailed expense report? Are the time periods that you're billing us, are the expenses that are falling under that time period under your detailed expense reports, do those line up? Also, as we fondly call it, mini monitoring. For those that have 2021, we will continue doing, that will be ongoing, our mini monitoring. That means that every request for funds that you submit, we will be asking for backup documentation on 2 or 3 items from that detailed expense report. Backup documents could range from, if it's rental assistance, you might ask for a copy of the lease, copy of the rental assistance agreement that's between the landlord and the agency, your document, your paperwork showing that you calculated your FMR, did your rent reasonableness, may ask for an inspection report, just to make sure that all of us are following the ESG federal regulations and that we are in compliance. So again, I just want to make sure everybody knows that that will be ongoing and will continue with every RFF. If you have any questions, again, please reach us at the NOPA box or your ESG representative. Next slide, please. For those that applied and were awarded under 2021 for homelessness prevention, it was in the NOPA, and we do have a homelessness prevention document now out on our ESG webpage under the resources tab. The expectation is now that you will have homelessness prevention policies and procedures, updated ones. They are our HCD homelessness prevention manual will help guide you through what is required and what our expectations are. We do ask that you submit those to us with your first request for funds. We will not be reimbursing any homelessness prevention without approving your homelessness prevention policies and procedures. So if you have any questions, again, because this is new for everybody, reach out and let us know. If you have questions, write them in an email, and we will be happy to meet with you if you want to meet and help you through that. And next slide, please. Just a reminder, we have some great policies and procedures that our HUD consultants, our ICF team has helped write and written for us. One of those is the homelessness prevention manual. We have one now on match. We have one on rapid rehousing, or we will be having one coming on rapid rehousing. But we do have a policy document out there under that resources tab for FMR and rent reasonableness, because that sometimes can be kind of difficult to navigate that. So that's just a reminder. If you haven't, go and take a look at our ESG webpage. Next slide, please. Again, if you go to the ESG webpage, this is what it looks like now. I do want to mention back to the homelessness prevention manual. We will shortly, you'll see a homelessness prevention checklist that will be underneath that manual there on the webpage. It should happen in the next few days. And that checklist is really meant to be a guide for both you, the grantee, and us. So to make sure you're incorporating all the elements that we want to see and that you will need in your HP policies and procedures. So that checklist will be posted here pretty quick. And next slide, please. And here is your great ESG team representatives. They're here to help you. If you have any questions, a lot of things going on now. We're closing out 2020s. We've got 2021 contracts routing and and being executed. And then we've got the 2022 applications. So lots of stuff going on. Reach out and let us know if we can help you in any way. And I will turn it back to you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Connie. And now I have just a few ESG CV updates and reminders. HCD is now amending the ESG CV contracts to extend the contract expiration date to December 31st, 2023. So the ESG contract amendments are currently routing. Be on the lookout for your pending amendment to arrive via email. The authorized signer must sign the STD 213, and then you can email it back to the HCD's contracts office as soon as possible. And if you have any questions, please contact your grant administrator. Next slide, please. The new term of the agreement and the performance milestones are as follows. The agreement will expire on December 31st, 2023. All program funds for projects, which include street outreach, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and homeless prevention, shall be expended by September 30th, 2023. All funds for HMIS and administrative costs shall be expended by October 31st, 2023. And all final funds requests shall be submitted to the department by November 15th, 2023. Next slide, please. The new expenditure milestone requirements are as follows. In accordance with the HUD's expenditure deadlines included in CPD 2206 ESG-CV notice, grantee must meet the following expenditure deadlines for the ESG-CV funding. Should the grantee not meet the following expenditure requirements, HCD reserves the right to recapture any unspent ESG-CV awarded funds up to the maximum amount listed below. And the amount listed below, the percentage of the ESG award is 75%, which must be expended by January 31st, 2023. And in terms of the maximum recapture as a percentage of the total award, this is the difference between the 75% of the total award and the amount drawn in IDIS as of January 31st, 2023. Next slide, please. Once you have received your executed amendment, you can submit an RFF through eCivis. Next slide, please. So we have some HCD office hour updates on our upcoming office hour topics. On August 31st, we will have our COC clinic. On September 7th, we'll have an office hour on procurement. On September 14th, we will have our HMIS clinic. And on September 21st, we'll have a monitoring refresher office hour. All requests to HCD for certification of consistency with consolidated plan should be sent to Alex Navarro, and we will go ahead and put Alex's email information in the chat, and it will also be available on the slides once they are sent out to our attendees. The training site to register for office hour series will also put this link in our chat. And we also have a link where you can view any previous office hour recordings. Next slide, please. September 1st, from 11 to 12:30, we will have a training on cultural humility, racial equity series. This workshop will provide an overview of the concept of cultural humility, and it will also highlight the benefits of embracing and practicing cultural humility. And we'll have the link where you can register for the upcoming trainings. We'll go ahead and post those in the chat. And again, for previous trainings, you can also visit HCD's ESG workshop and training YouTube channel. We'll go ahead and place this link in our chat. Next slide, please. We have our COVID response resources. So we encourage you at your leisure to visit these various resources. We also have information from the CDC and the NHCHC guidance. Next slide, please. We also have ESG resource links. So again, we encourage everyone to visit these information to learn more about the ESG and ESG CD grant. Next slide, please. Okay, so we will answer any questions that we have in our chat. So again, if you have questions, please go ahead and put these in the chat. I believe we have one question that was asked about the ESG application that was answered in the chat. I will go ahead and verbally also state, Connie did state that the ESG application is due by 3 p.m. today and not 5 p.m., which is stated on the slide.
That is correct. So those that had applied for 2022 ESG annual, they were due last Wednesday, August 17th, and we extended that due date to today, August 24th, but we did change it to 3 p.m. So if you have not done so, be sure you get in there and hit the submit button by 3 p.m. today.
Thank you so much, Connie. And we have a question regarding the ESG CB amendments. What email address will they be coming from? We have problems with emails blocked. How will we find out if the ESG amendments were sent? This is from Karen. So I did send an email out yesterday. It will come from Marion Goldburn to communities that the amendments have been sent to so far. The email is coming from HCD's contracts department. And so I will continue to follow up with communities who have should have received this email. And I usually send my email to all the authorized signers and the point of contacts for each subrecipient. And so if you receive an email from me yesterday, that means that we are still waiting on your amendments to be emailed back to HCD. And you can reach out to your ESG CB grant administrator at any time if you have any additional questions. I don't believe we are seeing any other questions at this time. So I will go ahead and turn it over to LaQuantia to introduce our presenter for today.
Thank you, Marion. Next slide, Taylor. Today our presenter is no stranger to us, as she has visited us on several occasions with the Racial Equity Partners. So today I turn it over to Dr. Rajani Shankar Brown for a Cultural Humility Workshop Series overview.
Thank you so much, LaQuantia and team. It is wonderful to be here today in this space, and thank you for having me. Just so grateful for our community. Next slide, please. So today, just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a peek into the series that's coming up. And so we have a Cultural Humility Workshop series that I will be facilitating with Donald Whitehead, Executive Director of the National Coalition for the Homeless, also the founder and partner for Racial Equity Partners. And so we're really excited to be able to focus on cultural humility, which really what we know about cultural humility needs to be something that is ongoing in terms of our own introspective work, in terms of our collective advocacy and our efforts together to build equitable and just communities. And so you'll see on this first slide, I just want to note, I have a photo of a mural in Norwalk, Iowa, that was done by an artist, Amanda. Amanda is actually located in Brooklyn, New York, and has done several beautiful pieces, even during the pandemic. Some of you may be familiar with some of her work around stopping Asian hate. Many of her posters were kind of circulated even through social media. But this particular mural, to me, art is always interesting because we all, as the viewer, also decode in different ways. But I really saw cultural humility when I saw this mural and stood before it. The idea of growth, the idea of ongoing growth, and how we have to nurture and invest and pour in order for us to grow. And this idea also of kind of collective growth and beloved community. And so I kind of open today with that. Next slide. So what we know is all of us in the spaces that we are working in have multiple identities, social identities. And some are visible, some are not. Some, carry privilege from a dominant perspective, looking at kind of how social constructions operate, and some do not. And so we're going to unpack a lot of this, but we're really going to do that as we do the introspective work within the framework of cultural humility. Now, we made this a series because cultural humility, there's a lot of different layers to it. So some of you may know a bit about cultural humility in terms of its historical origins. We're going to talk a little more about that also in our series, but it was coined in 1998 and really came out of healthcare. Since then, right, lots of evolution in terms of understanding the layers has really kind of unfolded and really brings very powerful applications for all of us as we work to advance equity, as we work to affirm diversity, build inclusive spaces, and build healthier, more just communities. Next slide. So a little bit, for those of you who may be wondering what's going to happen in this three-part series, we're going to learn and talk about and dive in and wrestle with a lot of different things, right? One, we're going to talk about the continuum of cultural consciousness. We're going to look at how does cultural competence differ from cultural humility, right? And often the terms are kind of used interchangeably sometimes in spaces, but there are distinct differences. We'll look at the principles of cultural humility, the many, many benefits of embracing and practicing cultural humility. And it is something that we have to actively engage and practice. And it's also, the more we practice, right, we get better at our own application, understanding with diverse cultures and practicing cultural humility. We're going to talk about systems levels application, and then we're going to look at many promising practices as well. And the series is really built where we'll have a lot of different information sharing. We're going to provide a lot of knowledge and information and resources, but also intentionally build in time for us to engage in some reflection, some critical self-reflection, and some also application connection making, if you will, into our own realms where we work, our own communities. And so I'm really excited for this. I'm so thankful for ICF and for everyone for allowing and making space for this, because I think it's something so important as we do this work, something that we want to hopefully center, embrace, and grow. Next slide. So again, thinking about all of these different identities, which sometimes in spaces can also be kind of like puzzle pieces in many ways. What we know also is that we have intersecting identities. And this is really a huge part of understanding, especially cultural humility, when we talk about cultural humility and its benefits. And you'll see there on the right, with this triangle, we're going to talk about cultural humility from different kinds of frames or lenses or perspectives. And some of those are going to include looking at beliefs and attributes, thinking about knowledge, thinking about skills, right, dispositions, and how all of these also overlap and how they can play out. And so we know when we talk about cultural humility, there's a lot of different central foundational pillars, right? Lifelong learning, partnership building, self-reflection, and self-critique, probably one of the most instrumental pieces. And so we're going to really have an opportunity to kind of dive in together, do some individual and collective work together, and to hopefully really advance the work that we are doing in terms of impact and equity and justice. And I'll just share, right? So cultural humility, again, it recognizes shifting natures as well of those intersecting identities. So you see all of these identities over here in the puzzle piece, but it really looks at the intersections. And it really doesn't see understanding culture and cultures as an end point, but instead it reframes that to say, we have to develop ongoing curiosity, ongoing self-reflection, and ongoing competencies and skills to really understand the evolving and dynamic nature of individuals and communities and cultures. Next slide. So, we are going to dig pretty deeply. And so the series, if you can't, so somebody had asked, earlier to me, if we can only make one session and not all of them, is that okay? Our hope is if you have time and you're available to come to all three, that will be awesome, because we're going to do some grounding and we're going to kind of build and scaffold as well. That said, you can absolutely just come into an individual session as well. And of course, ICF always shares out the resources and the recordings and PowerPoints. So you'll have all of that to access as well later. So again, our hope is you can join us for the full series, but if you can't, please come to what you can come to. And our hope is you'll get a lot out of it. We're going to ask a lot of critical questions and do some reflection, right? Some of those questions are, what parts of our identity are we aware of? What parts of our identity are most salient? What parts are privileged and marginalized? We're going to look at kind of power hierarchies. How does our sense of identity shift based in context and setting? What are some of our own biases that we carry, knowing that every single human has bias, right? Let's unpack that a little deeper and let's connect that specifically to the principles around cultural humility. So again, lots of different things that we're going to do. We will also share some historical context and some of the evolutionary pieces of cultural humility. So again, cultural humility, really being coined in 1998, although there are many references even through different terminology before that, but really coined, right, by Melanie Turbalon and Jan Murray Garcia in 1998. And we're going to look at some of those major principles and how do they apply, but moreover, how do we actively embrace those principles and put them into action into our work? And so we know, as you see here, right, I've kind of laid out some of these things just as snippets to take away. And cultural humility, first of all, we know it's an ongoing process. It is one that requires self-exploration, self-critique, and most of all, a willingness to listen and to learn from others. It means entering a relationship with another person with the intention of honoring their beliefs, their customs, their values, their life experiences. It means acknowledging differences, accepting people for who they are, understanding that even in our shared humanity and sameness, there are differences. Right. And as Maya Angelou, beautifully wrote, in diversity, there is beauty and there is strength. Cultural humility, again, it's not an end all, be all type of learning, but it is a dynamic, ongoing process. which again is why we kind of have intentionally carved out this space as a series. We wanted it to be more than just kind of one time, right? So we can actually practice and wrestle with, have some bridge work in between sessions for those of us who have time and space and bandwidth to maybe go a little deeper. And then cultural humility is a lifelong commitment. Again, lifelong learning, lifelong self-reflection. And, this last one is really critical, right? It also is, cultural humility is a verb. It is a commitment to address power imbalances. It is a commitment to say we're actively going to advance justice and equity and diversity and inclusion. And that starts by unpacking and understanding ourselves, but then being able to, again, listen in layers and understand and practice empathy and radical empathy. What Isabel Wilkerson in the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, describes as, it's not just about being able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, because sometimes we can't. Our life experiences may be so different. It may be something that we've never experienced. And so just trying to imagine ourselves in a situation sometimes can perpetuate actually injustice. And so how do we instead learn, step back, listen, honor another person's experiences, right? So this kind of radical empathy and revolutionary love, we'll get into some really good stuff, bell hooks, even some of our civil rights activists and how cultural humility was a part of the framework. So I'm so excited. If you can't tell, I get really passionate about this stuff. Next slide. So in terms of our promising practices, we are very excited. Donald and I are going to share some different examples, and we're hoping to also have good time to have kind of collective community discussion for folks to share out as well. And we're going to look at things from societal and cultural stances, institutional stances, interpersonal, individual, and also the intersections there, right, as well. We're hoping to do some small group, especially in the practice session, kind of in the middle there and at the end, just to give folks also an opportunity to kind of dig deeply in a space and dialogue and connect. And so we really want to keep this interactive. And so our hope again is that you'll leave with knowledge, or maybe a refresher if you've done stuff with cultural humility. For me, it's something that every time I revisit, I feel like it is a good cognizant reminder, but also keeps me growing, right? Which is really, again, part of cultural humility, that lifelong learning. So, hopefully we all leave with kind of a renewed, strengthened individual and collective commitment to doing this work together. Next slide. So here is our series. I could, again, go on all day about this, but I know we have limited time today. So I'm hopeful you'll come to the series and maybe share out as well, if you would be so kind, if you may have colleagues or folks in your community that you think would be interested and may benefit, please do share. Right? Everybody is welcome in the space, and we are looking forward to just engaging together. So we have it broken out. We're September 1st, 11 to 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. We are going to do part A. Part A, we're really going to look at cultural humility and how is it different than cultural competence. Really get a good foundation, again, as we dive into this work. Part B, September 8th. We're going to look at how we can promote cultural humility at those different levels, right? And so we're really going to get into some of that, start looking at practices and application. And then part C, we're really going to move into that application part a bit heavier, really looking again at how do we interact and make sure that we are learning to develop and strengthen our understanding, our practices, our commitment to cultural humility, especially as we work to center equity and build inclusive spaces in our community, spaces of belonging and love. beloved community. And so really excited for this. You'll see again, these are the dates. And again, if you can only come to one or two, that's fine. If you can make all three, fabulous. It's there as a resource for all of you. They will be recorded and shared out. And I know, thank you, Kristen. Kristen has put the registration link in the chat. So if you want to register, you can go ahead and take that link. And if there's anything specific as well within cultural humility that you're hoping to get out of, don't hesitate to reach out. You can maybe email, Kristen or Chris or LaQuantia or Marianne, email someone, and I'm sure they'll get it to me, or email me directly, and we'll make sure we weave and build that in as well, because again, we want you to get what you are hoping to get out of this. Next slide. And that's all. That is my trailer, wash trailer for our Cultural Humility series. If you have questions or comments, feel free to ask or drop them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer. And I look forward to seeing everybody in September and just being in community together to continue this important work. Namaste, and thank you.
Thank you, Rajni. Hopefully your presentation has sparked some interest in those that may not have known that cultural humility is something that they need more information on, or even as you stated, it's good to revisit cultural humility to help you grow as an individual and realize, that things change and that we all need to stay abreast of those changes.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, LaQuantia. And it is one that, I say that organizations really healthy, it's important we intentionally pause in this work and make space for this. And so again, thank you all for supporting this work.
I definitely agree.
Any questions or comments?
I was going to say, we don't have any questions in the chat right now, but if there's anyone that has any questions and would like to come off of mute, please feel free to do so at this time. If not, we'll try to wrap it up, but please do feel free. Unmute yourselves, ask questions. Well, there aren't any questions in the chat and no one is unmuting themselves. So as Rajni has stated, her email address is located on the slides. If you have questions later, you can feel free to email her or email any of our team members, ESGCV team members, and we'll get those questions to Rajni. As of today, thank you all for attending and being attentive. We look forward to seeing you all next week.